Just for those of you who maybe need it, I'm going to stick a trigger warning in here. We're going to talk about probably some sensitive things around growing up queer, growing up with chronic illness, and kind of just reflecting on our younger selves. So if you needed that, there that is for you. And for those of you that want to stick around, we'll dive right in.
Yeah. And, this is the season of joy. So we're still going to be looking at this hopefully through like a more joyful lens and going through how this helps you and helps your inner child and things like that. It might bring up some emotional things, but that's also good for you.
That
It's,
I mean, that's
it's
a
a good
part
thing.
of the reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully it's not too heavy of an episode. We also think it might be a little bit of a shorter one. So, we're going to try not to go on for like 55 minutes about
No one wants that.
about this one.
Nobody
Yeah,
wants
no.
55 minutes of heartache. Welcome back to Unpacking the Closet, the Queer Joy editions. I'm Geri.
And I'm Caitlin. This season, we're exploring how queer joy shows up, not just in moments of fun, but as something sacred, political, and deeply human.
Today, we're writing letters to our younger queer selves, the versions of us who didn't yet have the language, the safety, or the self trust that we have now.
This episode is a soft one, not in volume, but in intention. It's about the power of looking back with tenderness and maybe offering the kind of love we didn't always receive when we needed it most. It's going to be an
Yeah, we're
emotional
going to
one. I got to
cry
be.
already.
No, 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 no,
Um,
no.
no, I mean, I think this is really important. I think in the community, we talk a lot about how we didn't have what we didn't have when
Mm,
we were younger, like what we didn't have TV characters, or we didn't have adults around us that to look up to, or people that we felt were like us when we were younger.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We kind of like talked about with this episode that oftentimes growing up queer kind of means growing up like unseen or misseen. You're not fully seen. So that's kind of one of the reasons we've decided to do this episode, right? And we also, one of the reasons we put it in right now, I think, within our lineup of all the episodes is that we're getting so close to the holidays and the holiday
Mm-hmm.
season. And we thought maybe it would be really nice to, before the holidays fully set in for everybody, maybe give you an episode that can help you maybe address some of this before those big events. Maybe it will kind of help, release some things before you have to see family or, things like that. So hopefully this helps.
I mean, we were talking about during Samhain about like kind of that renewal and the
Hmm.
time of reflection and reflecting on like people that have been there for us in the past.
Hmm.
And I think this is the time where we get to focus maybe reflecting on ourselves and how we kind of get to be the people that our younger selves wish that they had.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe even the person that your younger self would be proud of now, that your younger self would be like so happy to see that this is how they turned out. You know what I mean?
100%.
I think, well, we'll get into it, but I think we have a tendency as people in general to never think that we've done enough. And sometimes it can be good to stop and think about all the things that you have done that would make your younger self really happy and proud of you? Because I'm sure that there are some.
And I mean, just throwing it out there. I mean, sometimes healing means talking to the version of yourself that never got to speak. And I think that's
Mm,
kind of what we're speaking to here as queer folks, because we carry our old selves with us too. And that child maybe now has the voice and it's through you.
yeah, yeah. Exciting. So, this episode's going to be a little different in that each kind of section is almost going to be a prompt, and it will be you can absolutely just listen to it and listen to what Jerry Lynn and I would say to our younger selves. But we're going to do it in a way that will give you some bullet points. So, if you're following along and you want to write a letter to your younger self as well, it will kind of be a guide to do so. And you could always come back to it after listening to it and do it later as well.
Maybe a little meditative moment.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think then the first question that we would ask ourselves when writing this letter, kind of going in an outline a little
Mm,
bit, is what did you need to hear when you were
mm.
younger? The things that no one said, but maybe should have.
Yeah, yeah. Who wants to go first? This is gonna be the hard part. Who goes first?
Yeah, I mean, I can go. I mean, I think something that maybe I would have loved to hear is that you are enough.
Mm,
I think I felt a lot like as a kid that I wasn't enough for, I don't know, my friends or with school or maybe even for my parents. And I really would, I think I would have needed to hear that maybe a little bit more.
yeah, I think for me, I needed to hear that well, it's hard to like figure out how I would say it. I think my biggest thing when I was little was that everyone told me I was like bossy. And I
Mhm.
think I needed somebody to reframe that into some sort of positive way of saying it. Not that I was bossy, but like that I was a leader, that I was assertive, that I I knew what I wanted. You know what I mean? I needed somebody to
Absolutely.
say it in a more positive tone, I think is what I need.
I
Is
think I would have also wanted to be seen maybe a little bit more, like
mm,
visible. And I think, you know, that's a tough one because I think for a lot of queer folks as kids, perhaps it's not safe to be visible or out and proud. And I know for myself, when I tried to be out and proud, the rejection that followed as a child just was horrific for me, and my social life
mm,
with friends, being that I came out at like 12. Reflecting back on that, and that even with visibility came this kind of rejection. I think that's also where like kind of maybe the visibility of like you are enough, you're okay, like you
mhm.
can be yourself, being different is okay. I would have loved to hear that more. And I think, you know, speaking about like queer youth too, especially in the climate that we're in, hope I hope they're hearing that. And if
Yeah.
that's you out there, I hope you hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they always say, what is the quote? To be seen is to be loved, right? Like to be seen
Mhm.
fully for who you are is to be loved. And I think even if it's unintentional, sometimes the things that family members and people around us when we're younger say or do unintentionally can make us feel unloved. Even if you don't recognize that that's what you're feeling, it can lead to that over time, right? That like you grow up feeling like you aren't fully loved by those people. So, yeah, so I agree like being seen for who you are in the most positive light possible, right? Like, my family had a tendency to point out like negative traits. So like I said, they would call me bossy, right?
Yeah.
Or like I talk too much or all these things, right? That were just like natural personality traits that I had. They just made me who I am, but they had a tendency to say it as if it was a negative. And whether or not that was something that they intentionally did, I needed somebody who would point those things out as a positive or show me why it was a positive or how I could eventually use those to my advantage, those natural skills, right, that I had, how they could be used. Yeah, which kind of also goes into our point that we had made in this section on the notes for ourselves about why like softness when you're a child and like safety really, really matter, not just to queer youth, but to youth in general. Kids really need that like soft, safe landing space in their lives. And a lot of us didn't have that.
Absolutely. And, you know, as you're talking, it's just making me think about, you know, not just the thing, like not just the internal stuff, because there's two parts to it. There's the internalization of the messages we got from the outside of what people were saying, and then what people were actually saying. You got bossy, and oftentimes I think people, or my perception of what people thought of me, I can't really remember what was said exactly. My perception was that maybe I was too emotional.
Mm. I got
And
that one too.
and it's like, oh well, like why are you upset about this? Like, you know, you're too emotional. I don't know if that was actually said to me, but that was my like internal interpretation of the things around me that were happening, is that having these loud emotions maybe were not okay with everybody.
Mm,
And similarly to like bossy, or like a, or like opposite of, or like in the same mindset of that but a different wording, would be a go-getter, right? Someone who knows what they
mm,
want. I think, often as queer folks, we're taught that our emotions are too much, or they're not seen as safe. Like
mhm,
even our emotional safety isn't
mhm.
available, as well as the physical safety.
Yeah.
And that, I think, makes it really hard to be your true self, at least outwardly. And those who took the risk often were met with that rejection,
Mm,
either because people understood visibly that we were queer because we told them, or maybe they were interpreting things from the stuff we were doing, which I think in my case, even before I came out, was clearly there as I reflect on that. And I think it's interesting to see what we do with that now, because I think
mm.
back then there wasn't much that we could do. Children don't have a lot of control
No.
over their environment or who we're talking to. Or like, I went to a Catholic middle school in elementary school, so there were like 36 kids, and you're stuck with them from like kindergarten to eighth grade. You're stuck with the same people, with the same rhetoric, the same social dynamics. And so you don't really get a lot of choice in that. You're just kind of handed the cards and there you go. But how can we become the person that we needed, or the person that we wanted to be now? And I think that's a really interesting question to kind of move into as we're reflecting on our history, and possibly writing these letters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, how do we now become that person that we needed, or maybe say those things to our younger selves that are still living within us, right? Because as we said, and I know in therapy they say this a lot, that like your younger self still is inside of you, right? And a lot of your emotions are still reacting because of that. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so how do we become that person, and how do we comfort that little tiny Caitlin, inside of me?
I'm gonna cry
Um
already. Honoring our younger selves, I think, looks different for everyone. But
mhm.
I think on one hand, I think therapy is very important. If you haven't gone to therapy, therapy's great. I can say that working in mental health, but nonetheless, another part though that really helps me kind of honor my inner child and that loudness is understanding how the things that I thought were negative and how I can utilize them now. So part of being
Mm,
an emotional person means that I have a lot of empathy, which means which led me to working in the mental health field, which leads me to coaching, which leads me also into self-expression, which is really, really important to me, being that it was very limited for me by peers as a child. So fashion and being able to express who I am in that way is also really important to me personally, but also, building community is really important to me, and honoring that space with other people who can commune in that understanding and history. It's why I love doing this podcast, which is why I love being involved in the queer community, because I feel so at home in the person that I am, because that is valued by other people as well.
mm, yeah.
But you kind of also have to build the confidence to become that person too, which is another challenge that is difficult.
Yeah, so maybe one of the things you could do at this point in your letter to your younger self is you could write down, maybe as a promise or as bullet points, or however it works for you, whatever makes sense for your letter, the ways in which you could now challenge yourself, if you haven't already done so, to be that person. What could you look at doing to kind of bring that part of you out and cultivate it and nurture it and care for it, right? And allow yourself to be that younger version, and to maybe fulfill some of those dreams or aspirations or traits that you hid, that you've suppressed for a long time. What are some things that you could do to bring those out and to really like help cultivate those things? Did you love fashion when you were little, and then you slowly over time got told that you dressed crazy, and so you muted your closet and now you just dress the same as everybody else? okay, well, then maybe it's time for you to promise to your younger self in your letter that you're going to start going out and buying fun pieces again. Like something that's silly that just catches your eye and you're like, wow, that's so fun. Like, look at that crazy skirt. I'm going to get that, you know?
Or
Or
change your
wow,
hair color
change
even.
your hair color.
That's something I hear a lot about with queer folks is people were like, I didn't want my hair that way. I didn't want to wear that dress,
Mm,
those kinds of things. And how beautiful is it if you're able to do that? Or maybe it's even thinking about how you are starting to expand doing that now that you have a little more autonomy over your life, maybe as an adult, or if you don't and you're younger, looking forward to that opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so many, this can go into so many fields, and only you are going to know what's best for you and the things that you really could work on for this section. But, like, are you in a career that would make your younger self happy, that you're happy with right now, Or are there other things you could do? You know what I mean? Love, what type of patterns have you fallen into with love? Are you like really gravitating towards people who are also going to like love your younger self and help you cultivate those things? Or are you with people that maybe repeat cycles um that are not good for you, right? Maybe it's time to look into that. And the community you have around you, are you surrounding yourself with people that um you really want to be with, your actual people who understand you? Or are you still in a community of people that like don't really appreciate the you that you are inside, right? Because we want to make sure this is all about becoming that person that we needed or that we wanted to be. Or it could be in this section of your letter, you have done a lot of that stuff, right? So maybe this is also a reflection of like, and it could be both. We all have stuff we could work on, but it could also be like, what have you done at this point to become that person? I feel like I have done a lot of work, especially recently. I have done a lot of work to really break through some of my things from when I was little, like becoming more confident in my singing and doing that more. That was something when I was little my mom told me that I wasn't a good singer. And that's all I wanted to be when I was little. I just wanted to be a singer, even more than a performer, even more than an actor. I wanted to sing. So even though it's made me nervous, I've pushed myself into things that have made it so that I have to sing in front of people. You know what I mean? I've taken voice
I
lessons.
love this for you.
Yeah.
I think also like if you're someone that's like this who's had something told to you that you can't do or you're not talented. I actually was having this conversation with my sister recently because one of the viewpoints that we both like absorbed as kids was that if you're not naturally good at something, that's it.
Mm,
And that's not a great mindset to have.
yeah.
To think that you can't improve on something. Like sure, you might not be the next Celine Dion, but that doesn't mean that you can't improve your voice or
Yeah.
that you can't sing. Or in our case it was a lot more around like sports, like oh well,
Mm,
you're not a runner, so you're not fast, so that's that. And these are things that you actually can improve on.
yes.
But I think this is the opportunity in reflection or in a letter to kind of be like, I'm so proud of you, meaning yourself, for doing all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of a trend that's happening right now on TikTok. I don't know if it's also over on Instagram,
Hmm.
and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the trend where people are like, "Oh, I could never be blank. I'm not talented enough." And there's an
I haven't
audio
seen
that goes with
that.
it, and then the audio starts to say it's not about talent, it's about practice, it's about whatever. And then people say the same thing in their slides, and they show whatever, they show themselves starting something and where they are now, like how good they've gotten now, and how like you didn't have to be naturally gifted. Like I've seen people do it with like pottery, baking, all
Oh,
sorts of
I love
things.
that.
And they show like their first cake, their first mug, their first whatever, and then they show slides of themselves getting better and better over time and where they've ended up now.
Oh my gosh, I love this
Yeah,
trend.
it's a
Because
great trend.
as I think this is something that's maybe commonplace, is others telling telling you or other people what you can and can't do. And I
Mhm.
think we get told that a lot as kids, regardless of who you are. Or maybe you're lucky and that wasn't you, but for a lot of us, it seems like that's the case.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful opportunity it is to be able to expand on that and taking voice lessons or going and expanding on something that you love. You know, it doesn't mean you have to be famous for it, or maybe you will be, who knows.
Yeah.
But, you know, just being able to have that ability to improve and desire to expand your horizons and your talents, I think is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I encourage you for this section, really reflect on the things that you have done to become that person and reflect on the things that you could still do. There's a lot of things that like are actually fairly easy to just pick up and do as a hobby. You know what I mean? That you could do just on the side. It doesn't have to be your career, but how much joy will that bring you to do that thing on the side and get better at it? You know what I mean? And then be able to fulfill that dream that little you had at one point. So there's so many things. So yeah, I love this section. I've
I
also
do too.
also done this with the bossy thing. This after being with Clara and really reflecting on stuff like that, and her, fully accepting me for who I am. Because like when we started dating, my parents and even some of my family would kind of say things to her like about me being bossy, like, oh yeah, like oh it's Caitlin's way, right? Like you got to do it her way, or blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that still didn't feel good. And then in talking with Clara about it, she was like, yeah, but I don't see you as bossy. I don't think that you're bossy. I think that's really negative. She's like, you just know what you want. You just know the things you want to do, you know how you want to do it. She's like, you're just a leader. You're assertive, right? That's how we kind of came out with like the idea of assertive. And I've really like grabbed onto that the last like 2 years. And when my mom even or anybody in my family, when they start to say anything about me being bossy when I was little, I stop them now. And I'm like, no, I'm rebranding that. I wasn't bossy. I was assertive. I'm an assertive person, and that's okay. That's a good thing.
I love that Clara reframed that for you. I think
Yeah.
it's really beautiful when when you're able to have people in your life who are able to see the benefits
Mm,
of you as a person, and
yeah.
can really kind of reframe that stuff. Does it all the time too. It's wonderful when you have people around that reflect who you really are,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
see through um, the mess, if you will, that is often clouded by other people's thoughts and opinions.
yeah. Oh, see, now I'm tearing up. See, this is why I had the tissues ready. I was ready. I knew
I
I was going to
mean,
tear up at some point.
it's gonna happen. This is a powerful a powerful thing to
No.
reflect. And I think what we're kind of getting to is this kind of like next part of the letter, moving into the building a future with hope.
Yeah,
This season has been about joy, and that doesn't mean that we ignore all of the toxic stuff that comes up, but it means that we are able to look with hope as a form of resistance to those things that have happened to
yeah,
us.
yeah, absolutely. So the next section of your letter would be, yeah, how do you now move forward with that hope, and how could you continue to do the things you're already doing? How can you build on that? I'm trying to think of like what I say like my building a future with hope would be. I guess for me it's the fact that like I'm really starting to finally lean into the fact that I really do want to work for myself. I really do want to be my own boss. I don't like that's just who I always have naturally been. I've always been a leader. I've always been assertive. I've always known what I wanted. And I'm good at leading. I'm good at things like that. And so I'm
100%.
yeah, so I'm like, okay, so like now I'm starting to really lean into that. And I like helping people and I like building community, like you said. So yeah, like we've made this podcast. That was one step, right? Towards like doing something that, I mean, literally, I told you my family said I talk too much. So what am I doing? I'm like on a
Oh, but I
platform
love
where all I do
talking
is
with
talk.
you.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
see, but that's the thing that I'm doing, right? Like I'm putting myself out there and I'm putting myself on a platform where that is the only thing you do. You talk and people listen to you and they appreciate you for it, right? So this is something I'm
Absolutely.
doing. And like
I really
My
appreciate doing this podcast with you,
I
for the
do too.
record. And I'm really glad that we get to show up and talk and address some of these things that have been big or small for
Yeah.
us,
Yeah. I'm
as
gonna start
well as
crying
other
again.
people too. Yeah, I know. I mean, I really hope that, speaking of future, of like speaking of a building a future with hope, you know, I think this, doing things like this and involving the community and talking about things that are important to not just us but to the people around us.
Mm,
I really hope that that's like an act of visibility. I think it's an
yeah.
act of choosing to show up, which is often the first step.
Mm,
We're talking about writing a letter to our future past selves, rather, and also to our future selves about where we're going. And I don't think that happens in isolation. Something that
yeah.
you and I talked about when we started the podcast was building a community, and I think that that is something that's really important,
Mhm.
um so that younger queer folks, hopefully y'all that are out there, you know have a different opinion about yourselves than maybe we did.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could also use this part of your letter. That's actually a really good point. This part of your letter could be maybe shifting towards your future self. And now you're thinking about like, okay, now what am I promising my future self? I've heard this a lot with people that like finally get themselves on like good routines, good like workout routines, good eating habits, things like that. I've heard quite a few of them say that one of the things they did was they thought about themselves at like 60 or 70 or
Mm.
80 and what were the things that they wanted that person to have, right? And be
Oh,
able
that's
to
a
do.
really good way of looking at it, actually, is working
Yeah.
backwards. Yeah.
So maybe that is this part of that letter for you. Maybe now you shift into now thinking about yourself as an 80-year-old person and what do you want to be able to still do? What do you want to have accomplished by then? And maybe even physically, what do you want? Like, do you want to be able to still walk without a walker? Okay, well, then what does that mean? What do you need to start doing now to achieve that so that your future self can be that person, right?
Right.
I think
Within your
that's
ability,
within your
physical
abilities.
physical
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
capabilities.
I
But
know
yes.
walking is obviously very like, subjective here, but it could be anything. It could be like, do you still want to be able to like do like the crossword puzzle? Okay, well, then
Right.
that means like working out your brain every single day and doing those things. You know what I mean? Do you still want to be able to, I don't know, paint? Okay, well, then that means taking care of your joints and your hands and, you know, continually
Absolutely.
using those muscles and taking classes. And, I mean, there's so many ways you could look at it and so many things that you could think to yourself that, you can look at how people, by the time that they're 80 on average, have lost the ability to do so many things and there were ways that they could have prevented it. So looking at that and figuring out what you want your life to look like at that time
When you're
would be a
talking
great
about
thing.
this, what's coming up for me is I really think life is about experiences. I really
Mm,
think life is something to be enjoyed and to have as many experiences as possible. And so something that's really important to me is travel, and seeing
yeah.
the world and seeing different cultures, and not just living in like isolation of, this is Los Angeles and this is my bubble, but expanding that and expanding my knowledge. Boy, I know that you and Clara also like that too.
Yeah.
But like thinking about kind of maybe what your future goals are
Mm,
too. Like, okay, I want to, for my mom, for instance, it was retiring by 50. She
mm.
did that.
Good for
I
her.
don't know how. I mean, I know a little bit about how, because she's really financially savvy, but that was her determination, is like she didn't want to work full time by 50, and she was able to accomplish that for one way or another. And again, not everyone has the financial means and whatever to do things quite like that, but whatever that is for you, the listeners, it's really about maybe a little bit more about goal setting even,
Mm.
and trying to focus in on what you want, even if you don't know how you're going to get there.
Right. Yeah, because the first step is creating that goal, is saying,
Hmm.
this is what I want. And then you figure it out along the way, but you can't do that if you don't know what your goal is, where what your end result needs to be. Right. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
setting
Hmm.
all those things in this letter. And that may align with things you may have in the previous section where you were thinking about, well, how could I be the person that I wanted as a younger self? And you may have realized while you're doing that, oh, I'm not there yet. I haven't become that person that I needed. Well, that's okay, because that's this section. Okay,
Right. And there's
now
no
we're thinking about,
timeline.
right, there is no timeline. So now you're okay, you know what you needed to do to become that person. Who is the person you needed? Now you make those active steps. Okay, bullet points, even what can I do? How do I get there? What's the end result? Right. So,
The first
yeah.
step is the awareness, the second part is the action.
Mm,
And I think something that we haven't talked much about, but maybe as we're talking about like the final thoughts of the letter and this episode, is you're allowed to be proud of how far you've come,
mm,
regardless of the goals that you've reached. And goals can change over time. So maybe this is one draft of many letters that you're writing to yourself.
yeah. Yeah. And your younger self doesn't always have to mean the same age, right? You may need several letters depending on different points in your life.
That's very
Your
true.
your younger self at 6 may need a very different letter than your younger self at 16.
That's very true.
And that's okay
Hmm.
too. You know what I mean? And it's good to explore all of those things. So, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
That's the end.
That's the end.
So, yeah,
But yeah, I think it's important to remember, this is something that I'm trying to emphasize a lot also with like starting my coaching, and that they emphasized a lot in the training that I was taking, is that it should never really be about perfection. You don't owe your
absolutely.
younger self perfection, you don't owe your current self perfection, or even your future self. It's always about just giving it your all and the small steps that you take, right? Like every single step deserves to be celebrated. No one is ever perfect. No one's ever going to be perfect. So really letting go of that and just telling yourself it's about the journey. It's about doing the things. Yeah.
And I think if for those of you who need the reminder, you're not too late, you're not too much, you're exactly who your younger self was waiting for.
Aw.
We all cry.
We all cry.
Keep showing up even when it's messy. We'll see you next time in the closet.